Hey everyone, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm going to be covering everything we know about Variant and Criterion dungeons so far. These new styles of dungeons are a big departure from our traditional dungeon content, so I figure it's worth giving everyone a heads up. I know most of you don't have encyclopedic knowledge of the game and don't watch every live letter, but these dungeons are coming out this coming Tuesday, October 18th in patch 6.25, so you should probably know this. Anyway, let's begin. Let's start with Variant Dungeons. This content features a brand new dungeon, the Sil'dihn Subterrane. You'll be escorting Nanamo through the remnants of this ancient Sil'dihn civilization to uncover its secrets. The dungeon requires level 90, has a minimum item level of 575, and an item level sync of 635. It is also suitable for anywhere from 1 to 4 players with no role requirements and will scale dynamically to the number of players inside. So if you go in alone, you can still beat it just as easily as you would with 4 people, or at least within an acceptable parameter. The difficulty is also considered equivalent to most story level content in the game, so don't go in expecting any major challenges. Variant dungeons feature branching story paths that change depending on how you choose to progress through it. You'll be given opportunities to select which way the party should go, altering the outcome of the story and changing the boss mechanics along the way. There are 12 listed endings, and there will be a reward for receiving all 12 endings. To assist with the dynamic party sizes, there are also bonus variant actions you can choose to bring with you. Here is the list that they showed us, and as you can see, they mostly allow you to cover weaknesses from within your role. So if you choose to solo the dungeon as a DPS, you'd really want to bring Cure and Rampart to help you stay alive. But even if you go in with 4 people, you can still bring these options in case anything goes wrong. You can select up to 2 of these actions to bring on the new special Dungeon Finder menu, which you'll unlock when you unlock the content itself. We don't know where the quest will actually be made available as of this video, so be sure to check the patch 6.25 patch notes when they are ready, or, well, I'm sure I'll make a video about it the morning of. For rewards, we aren't entirely sure yet. The menu states that it's worth 40 astronomy and 25 causality tomes at least, but there are treasure chests inside as well. Yoshi P just refused to open them. Troll. All Yoshi P has said is that mounts and other rewards have been prepared, and that's a pretty broad scope. We know one mount from the content is this mouse-looking thing, which is apparently the final boss of the Variant dungeons and one of the bosses in the Criterion dungeons. Given that he showed this off after just covering Variant dungeons, I wouldn't be surprised if this is a reward for completing all 12 endings, which they did say there would be a reward for. Now within the dungeon itself, the trash is pretty run-of-the-mill. Depending on which path you take, you might get different trash, but it shouldn't feel any different than going through a dungeon like you normally do. But the boss mechanics do change depending on which path you take, even if the bosses are still generally similar. For the rightmost path we see, the first boss main mechanic involves these barrels. One side is a donut AoE, the other side is a point blank. The boss eventually starts flipping these over to mix things up, so you have to go to the ones that are point blanks because they're going to flip over and become donuts. There are also a lot of room-wide AoEs, and the water grates below do alternating erupt patterns. I'd assume a little bit further into this we'd see those combined with the barrels, but we don't see that, so I can only speculate. That covers everything we know so far for Variant dungeons, so now let's cover Criterion dungeons. These dungeons are remixes of the easier Variant versions, but instead of branching paths, it is a lot more like a standard dungeon. One path, no NPC escorting, same enemies every time you do it, and traditional light party role requirements of 1 tank, 1 healer, and 2 DPS. The set path is also different from what you'll have experienced in the Variant dungeons. Heck, the first boss in Criterion is the final boss of the Variant mode, so I'm sure everything after that is probably a bit of a surprise. The most important difference is the difficulty, with Criterion dungeons made to be much harder. There are even 2 difficulties of Criterion, Normal and Savage. Criterion Normal was stated to be the equivalent of an extreme difficulty, while Savage is, well, Savage. These 2 difficulties have different rule sets from each other even, so let's cover them one at a time. Criterion Normal unlocks the dungeon Another Sil'dihn Subterrane. This version has a minimum item level of 610 and is item level synced to 635. As stated earlier, it has role requirements similar to a normal dungeon. If you queue into it solo, it will auto-match you with other players matching the roles you still need, so you don't need to worry about finding friends or using the party finder if you don't want to. You'll also queue in via that special dungeon finder that I mentioned earlier, though there's a separate tab for looking for Criterion players. The first special rule is that traditional methods of resurrection don't work, meaning your raise spells and Phoenix Downs are disabled. The only way to raise someone is to use the variant Raise 2 action. Every player is given one charge of this raise, though it does refill when clearing through sections of the Criterion dungeon, whether that be trash or an actual boss. Speaking of the raise, all of the other variant actions from before are not available in Criterion. Raise 2 is the only one. For Criterion Savage, the difficulty is amped up even more. Monster AoEs that were visible in Criterion Normal are no longer visible. The monsters hit even harder, and most importantly, all forms of resurrection are disabled. There's no variant raise, your regular raises don't work, and your Phoenix Downs ain't gonna do you much either. That means that if you die, you are dead until your entire party wipes. And if that wasn't enough, if the entire party dies at any point, you'll have to start from the very beginning. All trash and boss monsters will respawn, so you'll have to beat the entire dungeon in one fell swoop. And to top all of that off, an enrage timer starts ticking from the moment you pull the first trash monster. Take too long for the entire dungeon, and every enemy inside will enrage, quickly putting an end to your party. Due to the severe difficulty jump, you must pre-form a party before taking this content on. So use your party finder, link shells, free companies, discords, or whatever to find people looking to tackle this difficult and punishing content. Once again, we aren't too keen on the rewards from these dungeons. They both give 30 causality tomes, but other than that, we are completely in the dark about what we are going to get out of this. I expect another mount, some titles, things like that, but I'd be surprised if they gave us any actual armor or weapons though, as much as I'm kind of hoping they will. So I'm curious really, is there much replayability for this content after you've beaten it? Guess we'll find out on Tuesday. Now in a short gameplay preview of Criterion Normal, we get to see some of the enemy layouts. We see some monsters patrolling and a couple of packs of enemies as well. I should have mentioned that you actually need to clear every monster before progressing. The boss won't even appear if you haven't cleared everything out, so you're going to need to get to know these trash mobs pretty well. I assume that if you're familiar with these types of mobs, that you'll be able to identify the styles of attacks they're going to use. It's just going to be punishing if you are to let any of them through or get hit by any of the avoidable AoEs. Be prepared with stuns and interrupts whenever possible. Also, don't forget, pro tip, repose and sleep can both be used as stuns if the enemies are susceptible to them. This is something that players use inside of Bozja, inside of Eureka, especially the Baldesion Arsenal, so if you have that in mind, you can try to time sleeps if you know approximately when an enemy likes to use a skill. As for the boss itself, it seems to focus on using its pom-pom tail to determine AoE patterns. The bright lightning tail here causes 4 conal AoEs to occur intercardinally from the boss's center, and the tail can also turn into a dark lightning, which I assume would be the reverse in hitting the cardinals. When the boss jumps middle, it does a knockback to aim or resist before summoning 3 pom-pom brooms. These pom-poms have the same colors that the tail can have, though we aren't 100% sure if this determines the AoE patterns in the exact same manner. The big part of this we only get to partially see is the sweep attack. The boss selects a tail color and sweeps 3 times across a section of the arena. The first 2 sweeps are conal AoEs in front of them, hitting about a third of the arena. But the third swipe hits 2/3 of the arena, going far in the other direction from where the boss currently is. I suspect that wherever the first sweep originates from determines the sweeping order. So you can see here, the boss sweeps to the right, then sweeps to the left, and the final sweep is a super sweep to the right. So I'd imagine the other pattern would be to sweep left, sweep right, and then sweep far left. Basically stand right behind the boss and adjust after seeing the first sweep. Also, when the boss performs the sweep attack, if it hits any brooms with it that are a different color than whatever its tail is, it'll actually change those. So you'll really want to know how each of those AoE patterns actually works so you can determine a safe spot for the next mechanic. Now, Yoshida cuts away after running into the wall. Seems he forgot he had God mode on and needed a better way to reset the boss. But we do hear a split damage AoE go off after we see the boss cast a skill that, well, my Google Translate says is called High Shampoo. Seems all of the attacks are actually named after bathing in some way. They're shampoos or pom-poms or I don't know. There's a few different things there. But that's as far as our knowledge will take us in this. We do actually notice, though, that when he steps into the wall and gets the bleed, that it's not immediately lethal. It only does about 37,000 damage, and that's only about half of Yoshida's health here. It also seems like all the other AoEs, the hardest hitting one did about 54,000 damage, and that was the failed sweep mechanic that he got hit by. So it doesn't look like everything in the normal mode is an absolute one-shot, but you can suspect any and all of that in Savage to be an absolute disaster. Either way, I'm super excited to check this out, and I will be doing some content on this on the channel. Gotta get through it quick though, because I gotta get over to making my relic and making videos on that as well, because I know all of you are going to be waiting on that. But anyway, that is a wrap for this video. Be sure to like, favorite, subscribe, and share, and stay tuned for when Variant and Criterion dungeons actually come out, as we will be doing content on those. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Until then, take care.